Hey, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am excited to bring to you today a special episode because today is Global Meetings Industry Day. And the whole day is being celebrated by the industry across the board to show the value of meeting in person, having meetings to bring people together. And so I'm bringing these two guys, well, I don't know how to do that, these two guys together with me today to talk about sustainability in the events industry. And it's a really important topic, but really IMEX has been at the forefront of this across the board, as well as MeetGreen. So I wanted to bring them together to talk about what they've done at IMEX Frankfurt. So with me today is Eric Wallinger of MeetGreen, and he is the director of sustainability for the company. And then Roger Lehner, if I said that, Roger, I told you I would mutilate it. He is the senior operations and sustainability executive at the IMEX Group. Hi, guys.
Hi, everyone.
We're in three different time zones. Eric's at 7 o'clock in the morning. Roger, it's 3
p.m.
3 p.m. and I'm here at 10 a.m. So on the East Coast. So we're going to just jump right in here. You all, Roger, talk about, you all just produced a report on IMEX Frankfurt and the sustainability work that you've done. And Eric, MeetGreen was instrumental in that. And actually, before we get to the report, can you talk about how the two of you worked together to create the brand standards around sustainability for IMEX?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked with MeetGreen for a very long time at IMEX America. I think it started in 2012. And for IMEX Frankfurt, we are now in the third year running of having MeetGreen support on site as well. MeetGreen mainly do a few things for us. For example, the pre-event stakeholder engagement, which is very important. We have a few calls where MeetGreen put everyone together on one call to talk about our sustainability initiatives and where we can address any kind of critical points pre-event, and also where we agree what is measured and how the measurements are going to be delivered post-event. And then on-site, MeetGreen are there. We have the support of Eric just to kind of make sure that everything runs smoothly as agreed with all our suppliers. And then post-event, they produce a lovely report for us with all of our achievements and recommendations for the future. That's basically it in a nutshell.
Okay. Eric, do you want to pipe in on any of that?
I just wanted to second that and totally agree. We think of it in those three chunks, pre, during, and after.
Right.
But it's that iterative process and sort of picking up, looking at the data, seeing what our opportunities are, what we did well, what we could do better at, and then bring that into the next cycle. And I think that chipping away and consistent improvement has been one of the hallmarks of that relationship.
Well, and I think that's important. You have to measure, you have to have a starting point to measure, right? And I think that consistency is important across the board. What have you seen in that respect in helping across the board? Does that make sense? Is that redundant of what you just said?
No, I agree. For us, we are lucky that our events are in the same locations year after year. In Frankfurt, we are always in the same place. In Las Vegas, we have changed host venue once so far. So we really are able to build these long-term relationships and kind of build on what we learn in 1 year to continues to kind of improve our processes bit by bit and build on these relationships to gradually get better and continue to learn. And that really is one part of our core sustainability strategy. Really is to build on relationship, to improve, to continue to get better year after year, and to share what we learn as well.
Okay. Awesome. Now, and the report that you put out, and I'm going to provide, here's a link to it. I made a little bit.ly for it. So everybody can download the Frankfurt report in general, but I really want to dive into, because we're talking about eating at a meeting, focus on the green aspect, the sustainability aspect of the food and beverage at Frankfurt. So how did the focus on the green F&B, how does it align with the overall sustainability goals of IMEX Frankfurt in 2023? And what were those goals actually?
Yeah. So overall, some of the key focuses in our sustainability efforts are to measure our event footprint, which MeetGreen help us a lot by. We have a goal to deliver net zero events. We have always done some degree of carbon measurement at our events, but because of the urgency of the climate crisis, we are really kind of going deeper into that and increasing our carbon measurement in all aspects, including the F&B area. And with increased measurements, we're going to be able to make more changes and improve as well. We have sustainability education at our events, which is very important. And we, as you know, education at our events is free, so we make that accessible to everyone. We share what we learn to amplify best practice, and we do that with our sustainability event report. We give back to our local communities, and we champion the positive impacts of meetings and events. That's broadly what we want to achieve and how we approach sustainability. And in terms of F&B specific, we want to avoid single-use plastic wherever possible. In terms of the serviceware and in how the food is produced. We want to reduce carbon emissions through menu choices. We want to support the regional economy. So we try to source locally as much as possible, and really kind of that kind of benefit from that double impact, that we have an impact in the local community, but also obviously it reduces emissions from travel, because there are shorter distances.
Right.
And in general, we want to offer delicious, nourishing, and safe food that's accessible to people. So that's
awesome.
The focus in the F&B area.
And Eric, how do you measure? Let's look at one of those, the single-use plastic. And I noticed that Earth Day on the 22nd is all focused on single-use plastic, which I need to delve into some more. But what are the goals in doing that? And how do you measure it, and how do you not use them? Yeah.
The aspects of sustainable food and beverage that we look at a lot is serviceware, because that is our primary in-show waste.
Okay.
It's very common in America to be at the waste dock quite a bit and just looking at what's coming through. And so we're not throwing away structural elements and so forth. It is food and beverage waste. And so we spend a lot of time working on that. IMEX in Frankfurt had gotten things to a very high level in terms of plastic reduction before I even became on the program for Frankfurt. And so we were kind of, in that first year that I was involved with it, almost doing a single-use plastic audit in food and beverage, like kind of notating anywhere small amounts that it was. And we got an assist in the past year from German European law, which has helped kind of take the final pieces out. So we're right now either compostable or reusable. And so how to measure? We're looking at the embodied content of a lot of these materials. So embodied means what is the footprint to produce, manufacture, transport? So some of this comes from academic research and so forth, and we come up with a model. I'll just say one more thing about plastic, is that the region of Frankfurt, which I believe is Hesse, the state of Hesse, much of its plastic goes to a polymer center, which is a kind of new kind of plastics recycling.
Okay.
This new technology is actually deploying in the United States.
Oh.
The first polymer center in the United States is in Las Vegas, interestingly enough.
Right. Yeah.
Which in Mandalay Bay's waste will be going to supposedly this month. So IMEX this fall, plastics will be treated slightly differently. So we don't know yet, but in some ways the process is changed, gives us higher confidence that plastics are actually being recycled, and recycled with less enriching, so less virgin plastics. And so I'm not saying the narrative is totally changed at all, but there is some new technology that's happening, and IMEX Frankfurt and America are both feeding into this new technology that we're learning more about.
Okay. And that's really interesting because it is like, where does the plastic go, right? And how does it get reused? And I know in the water episode that you and I did last year, you were going all the way down to how much water was used to make the plastic bottle that, that's being utilized. But when we're talking about single-use plastics at an event, I mean, I'm thinking the silverware, right? And then the packaging that water bottles, even maybe aluminum water bottles, is wrapped in. Can you talk about what that single-use plastic is and that you have reduced?
Well, the different plastics have different resin codes. So you'll see, whenever you see that number on the bottom of a plastic.
Yeah.
1 through 7. And so we basically are separating our plastics that we do have in our waste system into their various categories. Problem is that plastics recycling is mostly market-based. So in America, 1, 2, and 5 are what we have a steady market for, and that's what the Polymer Center will accept. And similar in Frankfurt, those are our dominant plastics. And number 1, PET, is the most infinitely recyclable. Of those, requiring the least enriching. And so aluminum is a product you'll see us choose quite a bit because of its infinite recyclability. So the carbon footprint you're incurring from that is from its original manufacturer, but there's lower amounts as the supply chain advances. So anyway, we're kind of looking at things in terms of a material breakdown. And films, we are able to recycle in America. Because we're able to source separate them and bale them. So it's not a robust market, but there is a market for baled film. And so the visqueen and things like that you see entering the exhibit hall, that's recovered and recycled essentially.
So in Frankfurt, did you have challenges because you said they were well ahead, Roger, you guys were well ahead when Eric got into this, but what were your challenges that you had in implementing single-use plastic reduction?
Want to take that one first, Roger?
Yeah, so I would say some challenges may be a little bit surprising. So I remember one year when we were already quite far into the program, and there were some single-use plastic items that we were not able to eliminate quite quickly enough. So for example, in terms of coffee, there was one item which was a container that was used for a latte, and when we asked the venue why that one was still plastic while others were already paper-based, the reason was that they needed to be able to see what is inside so that the person at the checkout can ring through the correct item, because the latte was more expensive than other coffees, so they had to make sure that the correct price was charged for the item. That was the only reason. And then in the next, we said, well, can you figure something out? And then in the next year, they were able to change that. And then ultimately, like Eric said, there was an assist from the legal side that in Germany and I believe in the whole of the European Union, single-use plastic serviceware is now actually not allowed anymore. So it's not an issue, because they had to they had to eliminate it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that one with the seeing what is inside to charge the right price, that was a very interesting one, and a very unique reason. So
Right.
there
Yeah.
are reasons why certain things happen. Other reasons might be, so that's an example from IMEX America now, but in terms of how things is served, sometimes we for example, dish salads, which have a kind of a plastic lid on top, or a kind of a clamshell type serving. We really challenge the venue to eliminate these type of containers as much as possible. But sometimes people just want to see what they get, what's inside, and that's another reason why sometimes we have challenges to completely eliminate the single-use plastic. And compostable is not always an option either, because you might think something is compostable because it says so on the label. But before you actually adopt a compostable container, you have to check that the processes are actually in place and the utilities in your destination are able to process these items. So, for example, in Las Vegas, we went as far as ordering samples, and then they were delivered to the facilities in Las Vegas, and they examined and checked them to say yes or no if they can be composted or not.
Well, and I think that's a Tahira just posted something, net zero our impact. So I thank you, Tahira. She also works for IMEX. And appreciate that, sweetie. Sorry, I just said that on air. But the because somebody was talking to in the States is like, yeah, there's no compostable facility south of the Mason-Dixon line, right? So that's really doing the compost work. So it really is following the truck and finding out where it's going and figuring out what they can and can't do, right?
Yeah, that's really important, and we had to do that in Las Vegas. And sorry, I don't know what the Mason-Dixon line is. I miss North American,
southern eastern part of the United States. Sorry about that, Roger.
It's all right. So Las Vegas would be south of that.
Well, it's actually East Coast side, yeah. But yes,
okay.
Yeah.
So in Las Vegas,
yes.
There are local composting facilities in Las Vegas, but they are very specific in what they can and can't accept. And it's the same in Frankfurt as well.
Okay. And Roger, Eric, you were going to pipe in and say something on that.
I do think that there is more composting than meets the eye. So I worked with a great composter in New Orleans, for example. U.S. South. Just did an event in Miami last year with a wonderful composter. There are 12 U.S. states that have organics laws.
Okay.
But that is bound to change. So meaning that if you have a particular threshold, if you produce a metric ton of organics, for example, either a week or a month, whatever it's defined by, you've got to do something with it and not just throw it out. Also, many sites in the U.S. have what's called a digester.
Yep.
And so that essentially pulverizes it and sends it out with a water effluent. And
is that just food, or is that the compostable stuff too? You would not put
serviceware in there.
Okay.
There is I'm trying to think what they call this, a biomass machine that I saw at a stadium in the United States. And so that's also probably going to be a technology wave of the future, having an on-site biomass machine that you can feed in recovered compostables. Okay. But yes, there's so many details unique to each site.
Right. Right, exactly. And you all, and Roger, like you said, it's great because you're in the same location every year, so you can really monitor how those changes are seen across the board over years. Whereas if you're changing, going from Vegas to New York to Miami, those changes vary by the venue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where, I mean, even for us, the support from MeetGreen is invaluable. And I can really see for someone who organizes more than the 2 events that we do, jumps from one location to the other, how important it is to really get the help and just to know what question to ask as well, how to address these topics.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk. I was just looking at the report, and one of the things one of the sections in that says the plumbed water stations, which is water refilling stations. How has that been adopted at IMEX Frankfurt? I mean, are you encouraging people to, I mean, I'm sure you're encouraging people to bring their own water bottles, but have you seen an uptick in usage of that? Or are they still buying water bottles, or if they're even sold at the show?
Yeah, they are sold at the show. We don't actually measure, we don't have any specific measurement on that. So what we do is because there aren't any inbuilt water station at the venue like there are in other places, we have our own supplier and we provide these in certain locations. And what we try to do as much as possible is to build it into our communications to make sure everyone knows that they have the ability to bring their own water bottles to come on site, to refill on site. And then one thing that's interesting in Frankfurt in terms of water is actually that all the booth catering, the majority of that is actually served in glass bottles with a deposit scheme. So when an exhibitor orders water, they pay a little bit extra because they receive the water in glass bottles. And then at the end of the day or at the end of the event, the catering company, they go around and collect all the kind of the crates with the empty bottles, and the exhibitor gets the deposit refunded. So that is one way how they have addressed the plastic. And they get glasses as well, rather than just the kind of the paper or the plastic cups to serve water as well. So they really have a big stock of reusable serviceware that exhibitors can get from them.
Okay, awesome. Eric?
I'll tell you, from going back of house to many of the Frankfurt hotels serving IMEX or Alte Au Pair, Messe Frankfurt, back of house in German venues is full of racks of glass bottles.
Oh, wow.
So this deposit scheme really does incentivize recovery. Glass is one commodity that in the United States, it's not recycled in some municipalities because it's cheaper to make virgin glass.
Right.
Just the economics of it. Not that it's right to do that, but that's just how it plays out. So anyway, it's just really interesting to see at a German venue the rigor in terms of truly recovering and reusing the glass. It's not broken; it's neatly in racks.
Well, it reminds me of being like 6 years old, and you would go take your soda bottle back to the grocery store and get your 5 cents, right? So it's teaching them, but in this larger scale.
Yeah.
Another piece is the water in the U.S. That was, I think, Wallop Water, Roger. They have some really interesting tracking that we saw at IMEX America in 2023. So that has sort of like a measurement component, which I thought was really fascinating. And Mandalay Bay, with the remodel that they just completed, there is a number of water stations in all the foyers in North Convention Center, and those do have a counter on it. And at IMEX America, I mean, we took a reading on Sunday, and then took a reading on Friday, and just did the math between there.
Oh, that's
like
smart idea. Yeah.
Just because it was available to us.
Right. Yeah. So Roger, is Messe Frankfurt, which is the location that you have the conference, are they looking to install the water stations, or will you have to do your own, what did you call them, plumbed water stations again?
We will do the plumbed ones again this year. I'm not aware of any kind of timeline for Messe Frankfurt to install the water. What I would say though is the tap water in Frankfurt is really good quality drinking water, and it's perfectly fine to just drink water off the tap. But obviously people wouldn't go to like the restrooms to refill their water bottle out of the normal tap.
Okay.
But they could, like, it's exactly the same water and it's completely drinkable.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, let's jump to the menu design. And how, and on the report, there's a whole page on menu design. It's page 13. So in what ways did IMEX Frankfurt, what did you do to reduce your carbon emissions in designing the menu choices? And I'm assuming that you were very deliberate in working with Messi Frankfurt to say, this is what we want and this is what we don't want on the menus.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked over many years with Messi Frankfurt on the menus, and we have a few kind of core principles. And one of the core principles is that we want to eliminate high carbon items to begin with. So, for example, beef and lamb are not on the menu this year because they are the two meats, the two proteins with the highest associated carbon emissions overall. And last year, if you refer to the report, we did have a very small amount. It turned out there were some items that we weren't aware of. We tried to eliminate, but they snuck into the menu through the back door, you could say. I think they were on the kosher menu, which is not something that we actively plan, or we didn't actively plan it last year, but we are going to this year now that we know. This year, the high carbon meats, lamb and beef, are going to be eliminated. And then we also just make sure that overall we have kind of a good balance between meat, fish and vegetarian and vegan options. So we aim for roughly 50% vegan or vegetarian main courses at the least. And one thing which is very specific that we are very insistent is that these options are always listed first on the menu. So when people look at the menu, it's not going to be your traditional, here is your meat, here is your chicken, here is your vegetarian option. Our menus are always plant forward. So they start with the vegan or plant-based vegetarian options, and then there is a meat option a bit further down as well. And that might be a very slight change, but we actually believe that it has significant impact. We don't have actual data on it, but I know from speaking to people that they just chose, for example, the plant-based burger because they knew, oh yeah, IMEX is a sustainable event. They saw the plant-based burger. Okay, that's probably what I'm going to have to get because there won't be another burger. So even though there was another burger further down, they just chose the plant-based because it was the first one they saw. So anecdotally, I know that this strategy really works. Okay.
That's interesting. Well, and there has been some research done that on, I think, on small scales, is when you put that in front of them, in front of people, they will choose that versus the other because it's just changing your thought process. So, and did you see, and I don't know if you're tracking the purchasing history of people, at the thing, were you seeing more purchases of that across the board? Are you tracking that?
We probably could. I don't think we have done in the last report. But one thing that we have tracked over the last couple of years is at our gala dinner, which always happens on the Wednesday evening. It's the gala event where several awards are given out, industry awards, our own Academy Awards. And for the first time last year, we kind of changed the way the registration works. So in the past, we asked during the registration process or the kind of invite process if people had any dietary requirements. So if anyone was vegan or vegetarian, they could select that at that point. What we did differently last year was that we gave everyone the option if they wanted the meat or the plant-based option. And we accompanied with a message to say that we have put together this really amazing plant-based menu, and it is better in terms of sustainability, and really wanted to encourage more people to select the plant-based option. And in the past, we had about 10-12% of registration saying they were vegan or vegetarian. So that meant 10-12% had the vegan or vegetarian option. But last year, that jumped up to well over 30%.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that was a really, really big increase, and we're hoping to repeat that again this year.
Awesome. Eric, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
To agree with Roger. Also, that idea of changing the default. So in the past, the default was a non-vegetarian meal, like any vegetarians out there. And so IMEX has changed the default somewhat in the way that it's presented this. Also, what was really interesting is that attendees are given these options. 58% of Hall 9 food cart sales, so when you go through the atrium into Hall 9, were vegetarian or vegan. So that is kind of a little bit of a sales metric. So this is, they had other options.
Right.
But it was, I think, kind of validating to see that that's what the marketplace sort of bore out.
Okay.
There was higher maybe than we expected uptake in sales.
Meaning that's what the 58% chose those options over, or that was what 58% of what was offered.
Yeah, maybe it was 50-50, but again, these are these food carts, different options. But of the sales reported, 58% were vegan or vegetarian. Okay.
Now, Roger, when you posted your thing the other day that you were going to be on the show, somebody sent me a text message and asked me, they're high protein, right? Their whole focus in their lively, and how they eat is very high protein. So when you're designing these, and he said he's had trouble eating at IMEX events to meet his dietary needs of high protein. And I know someone else that has to have animal protein for whatever reason she has. So how are you addressing that? Because, and I understand the sustainability wise too, but also part of ESGs as well is the health of individuals as well. So I do know that you have those options, but how do we balance it out? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't think we've ever looked at actual protein content of our options. I'm not aware that we go that deep into the basis. I'm vegetarian myself, have been for 22, 23 years now, and it's perfectly fine. Like it's not a problem to have, and there are vegan diets as well. It's very easy to get your protein from a plant-based or a vegetarian diet. That said, that's obviously not the way we are going. We do believe that everyone has the choice to have meat or fish. What we think is important to see as well is that the time that people spend on our show, that's one of their three main meals a day. So people still have the breakfast and their dinner. If someone needs more protein or other options, there are other opportunities for them to get that on site. And we do try to offer a variety of different foods. So obviously we want to offer healthy food at the events.
Right.
But we are also conscious that people are there to have a good time. And for some people, it's important when they go to an event that they might be able to get their comfort food, which might be a burger or a slice of pizza. And it's important for people to be able to get that as well. So we try to create as much as possible a balance between really healthy, nutritious food, but also some food which some people might be considering a little bit more kind of more standard, more comfort food as well. In terms of the protein I would say if anyone does have any specific requirements, we always welcome people to get in touch with us. And one thing actually that we have been doing since last year is that a few weeks before the event, we always make the menus of these food stalls available on our website. So even before people come on site, they can have a look and see, oh, this is what's going to be on offer at IMEX, and they can prepare in that way.
Okay. No, I'm a big proponent of sharing the menus in advance so people can be prepared mentally and, in their suitcase or the grocery store as well. So one of the questions, because you mentioned regulations a few minutes ago too, about the single-use plastics and things like that, but the EU, and we talked about this briefly before the show, EU has regulations around food allergens and labeling. And so how do you, when you're choosing these menus, are you working with them also to provide options that meet different food allergen needs? Like, I mean, the vegan dishes would be free of probably all the top 4 in the EU. It's 14, but there could still be cereal that contains gluten, right? So how are you managing the gluten-free options, the nut-free options, things like that when you're designing your menus? Are you doing that as another way of sustainability practices?
Eric, do you want to take this?
Nope, right there.
EU option or
Yep.
allergens here.
Yep. 14. Yep.
And so, we do rely on our venue partners, so IMEX Frankfurt and MGM, to be legally compliant, in terms of what needs to be disclosed in America. We
not much.
Well, we have certain USDA requirements in terms of ingredient communication and so forth. So anyway, we do rely there. From that point, I would say it's kind of an iterative process between the venue teams, and the menus are circulated internally at IMEX with those that sort of have a stake in looking at sales, and getting feedback from the event. We're looking at it from a sustainability lens. Right. And then sort of ensuring that we have the most coverage, that it's the most inclusive of people's health, inclusive of their protein, inclusive of the environment. So that's sort of the process. And I would say, though, the original onus is on the venue for us to make sure we're legally compliant. And then we're trying to kind of do our best through a process of feedback internally that we're hitting that balance.
Well, and I'm just going to throw my personal experience in, and I talked to chef at MGM last year, but none of the hot entrees were gluten-free last year at IMEX America, that is. And he realized that after the fact. So it's like so that required me to go off site to go get something to eat, because even all the salads contain gluten on them. So, and so that's kind of where, that means that something, and I look at it from a perspective of too, is like, if I put down a plate in front of me and you all are asking, which I love, and very much push for people to do, but if it's put in front of me and I can't eat it, then that plate is getting thrown away. Right. So that's another sustainability aspect of that. So, just to throw that in there into your mix of designing menus.
Absolutely. And yeah, I have to kind of put my hands up here and say it's not, and as your example shows, it isn't something that we actively do. And I don't think we've received much feedback about that. So it's really important to kind of get that kind of anecdotal feedback from individuals as well, because if no one really says something, then it's really difficult for us to improve. But now we know, and we can try to do something about it. One thing I would say is in Frankfurt, an option that we do have there, luckily, which we don't have at IMEX America, is that there is a self-serve restaurant as well, which is kind of like a buffet. And I would very much hope that would give a good option for the majority of people, because they can just help themselves to the things that are safe for them to eat.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I hope, hopefully they do. And I know there's lots of laws on that. Eric, on your sheet of paper, well, lots more laws on labeling to the consumer in the EU. In the US, there's not laws on labeling to the consumer except on prepackaged items. Hopefully it's coming, but you had that sheet up, and I know you had that, but last year, and because I haven't been to Frankfurt's event late in a couple of years, but last year on the MGM one, you had the little icons with the water and things like that. Are you doing that at the Frankfurt event too? And how do you figure out that?
It's been in water-wise.
Yeah, water-wise, and I think there was another one you had. Maybe it was just the
low
vegan.
carbon and water-wise.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that comes from academic research.
Okay.
You'll see some of it on Our World in Data. Pour and Nemechek, there's a research pair that published a lot on this. There's others, but they're round estimates. But they're looking at the manufacture of food. This can include the land use of food. Water content, there's a little bit less of the embodied water content. So if you have a field of beans, or if you the water to raise beef, these kinds of things. So there's a little bit less on the water side, more on emissions, but we are taking a high pass filter through the menu to kind of come up with a few options that we can highlight that tend to be lower carbon and lower water to raise from manufacture. They often are the same item, plant-based item often. But things like cheese is fairly high on water content. So then if it's a salad with a lot of cheese, there might be something that has a lower water content, for example. But one thing that's really neat about that this year is that we are wagering an estimate for the gala dinner.
Oh, so explain that.
Between the two options.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so we went through item by item, based on the best emissions factor we could find,
right?
And just summed those up. But what's really neat is that if you are having chicken, pork, or fish, and there's just a chicken option for the gala dinner, you're in a really great, low emissions category for an animal protein. Okay. And so just wanted to kind of throw that in about the IMEX menu, is that there is not red meat on it, or like a beef per se, that's highest. But there's lots of animal protein on the menu. They're just lower carbon iterations.
Gotcha. Right.
Pork and chicken are very, very similar. Fish is very similar. Okay. Tofu, for example, is just off that, slightly lower.
Right.
So we've been trying to get into that kind of lower range of emissions.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So academic research, portion size.
Yeah.
And
okay. And I know there's one link that I used to share that you could put in, like say I'm going to serve cauliflower and I'm going to serve beef, and then it would give you out your water. I need to go find that link. I thought it was interesting. I'm sure they have pre-populated things in there to measure it, but I'll find that link and share it. Roger, because you've been at Messy Frankfurt for a while and you've implemented these strategies in the menu planning, how has Messy Frankfurt received this, and are they really like passionate about helping you do this, and are they doing it for other events, or is it just strictly for IMEX?
So they are very, very receptive. Ultimately, we are a client there, and we're very lucky that they are very supportive of how we want to design the menus. I believe it's one thing as well for them. Ultimately, they are a business and they want to make money. So if we are the ones saying, right, this is what we think will have a good reception with our audience, that helps them as well, because they know, okay, they're going to make the sales out of this as well. And maybe passionate is a little bit a strong word. There are definitely a lot of passionate individuals at Messe Frankfurt, but it really is depending on the person as well. Some people are a little bit more, some people are a bit less, but in general they are very interested on board, and in the sense of that they actively take part in the discussions, make suggestions on what we can do to improve as well. So yeah, it's been a very good collaboration with Messe Frankfurt overall.
Awesome. No, and I think that's important, because you have to come to, thank you for, Eric just shared with me the event food carbon calculator. So I just put that on the chat. So thank you very much. Or I assume that was Eric that sent that to me. Yes. But I think we have to, I think planners have to come to the table with what they want, right? And Eric, I mean, you do this with not just IMEX, but you really do have to say, hey, these are the things that we want to manage. And before the show, we talked about just start with one. So what recommendations, food and beverage wise, to reduce waste, Eric and Roger, what do you have for other planners to say, this is where which one's the easiest to get started with, if there is one that's easy to get started with?
Well, not sure if anyone's read the Miss Rumphius story.
No.
What are you doing to make the world more beautiful? I mean, more beautiful place. Well, I recommend that everybody add kind of a line item into their meetings. Like, what are you, in your planning meetings, what are you doing to make your event more sustainable? What are you doing to make your food and beverage more sustainable? If you can say one thing, that's a start. And so
Right.
in terms of what that thing would be, some easy things are, if the idea of a plant-based meal is appealing to you and the topic of lowering carbon, that's certainly easy to do, although there are issues associated.
With chefs who don't get that.
Yeah, there is that. You also can really tackle serviceware.
Okay.
And I would recommend, if you're a planner, you will see such a difference in your waste stream by tackling serviceware.
Okay.
And I'll say one last thing. Even helping your venue grow in its capacity to process organics.
Okay.
IMEX America, of its waste stream, about 28% last year was just organic waste, wet waste, some compostable serviceware. That's a big chunk missing if your venue doesn't have that. And you may not be able to make it perfect in year one, but even just having that conversation. So those are sort of three directions you could kind of take.
Okay.
Getting started.
Awesome.
How about you, Roger?
So I would say, while still kind of offering the flexibility, and that's what we try to do as well. We don't really want to be too restrictive. We want to give people a choice, but even within that, I think there's things that can be done. And for us, what's been really kind of eye-opening is just looking at the data. For example, the associated carbon emissions from different proteins, to see why we wanted to eliminate beef and lamb. We have the link on our in our sustainability report on page 13 that you mentioned before as well. And if you go on that link, you see that these two options, it's just so much more. The carbon emissions are so much higher than everything else. Then by trying to kind of disincentivize these options, or in our case, eliminate them completely, that is a really big impact. And that is the reason behind, not because we think, oh, well, yeah, it's the best because we just think so. It's actually the data behind it that proves it. And making these kind of subtle changes by putting the plant-based options at the top of the menu and explaining why we'd like everyone to consider choosing them over the other options. And then people still have the choice, and they can make an educated choice, but at least they know why we are trying to do it.
Okay. No, and that makes sense. And I think understanding it is an important thing, and sharing that education behind it, I think, is really, really important for across the board. So I just went and found that link, and I'm going to, I've shared it in some of the comments. It doesn't share on Facebook or on LinkedIn for some reason. So I will do that. I forgot what I was going to ask you. What have you seen? I mean, besides the reporting that you've provided, what have the unexpected benefits or outcomes resulting from the emphasis on green food and beverage at IMEX Frankfurt? Anything that surprised you?
I mean, to me, what is surprising is that people are generally on board. And like I said, with sharing why we are doing something, just has such an impact, rather than just saying, well, this is the sustainable option, you have to do it. If you give the information, this is the option that's better for the environment and for the planet because of X, Y, Z, then people are more often understanding and not. And ultimately, we still give them a choice. And we don't take it personally if people then don't take that option, because they need to they know best what they want to do and what's for them. So yeah, that is really kind of one of the big learnings from my side.
Eric, what about you? You've been doing this I mean, you both have been doing this for a long time, sorry, but what have you seen?
Just to echo Roger's sentiment, that stat about 58% of Hall 9 food cart sales were vegetarian options, that was surprising. Because when we do feel like attendees are on board. I also, I'm surprised at the power of reusable serviceware. So Centro and Granello, we can get numbers from the meals that we sell there. And so those are all on reusable serviceware. Those are the two kind of restaurant outlets inside of Messe Frankfurt. Almost 3,500 meals sold there on reusable serviceware. That's saving about 1,158 kilograms of waste entering our system. Yeah. So that's just something we don't have to process. In America, that water is being returned. So if you're washing dishes, it's going right back into Lake Mead after it's treated. And the energy in Frankfurt, for example, is renewable energy powering that venue to wash the dishes. So it just comes out way ahead. So I guess in my time in event sustainability is just seeing the numbers and seeing how powerful reuse is. Almost every time it's better to reuse it.
Yeah. Roger, did you want to say, you had another idea?
Yeah, one other thing that I think is really important. Over the last few years, we kind of have broadened our spectrum of how we look at sustainability, or kind of plan for sustainability in a different way, by looking at more kind of the personal, the people, the social part of sustainability, which is so important. It's really important that people understand sustainability is not just ecological. The social part is a very important part as well. And kind of one thing that we have started looking into is how to design, or how to plan events for people with different neurodivergent needs as well. For example, like you said as well, how important it is to put the menu onto making the menu available beforehand. That is not just important for people to plan because they might have allergies. It's also very important for people who are neurodivergent, so that they can plan what they can eat at an event, where they need to go, and it makes them feel safer, and they know, and they'll be able to contribute better and to make the most of their event. And it's such a small thing for us as a planner to do, but it completely changes the experience for someone who actually needs that. And another thing is something called, I think it's a safe food. So it's important that people know if they are in a difficult situation, maybe at an event, something unexpected happens that they struggle to deal with. A safe food might be something that can help them deal in a situation like that. So if they know that they have that available at an event, that can really make a difference for them as well.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because it is something that we don't consider. And I've had a couple of guests or guests on the show to talking about that. One of them was talking just about the alcohol, and right, she doesn't drink because she's autistic and she doesn't want to add that. So she wants non-alcoholic that's not filled with sugar, right? So those kind of things really play into that person's experience. And she did mention too, like the food textures, right? So understanding those things. And so thank you so much for doing that and bringing that up, because it is a different aspect of inclusion when you're thinking about food and beverage. And as well as the people who attend our events who are visually impaired, or making sure that those documents are also available for them, or people who utilize wheelchairs, can they access the space? So that's a whole nother element of inclusion and thinking about that social aspect of sustainability. So thanks, Roger. I love that. Two final questions, because we're getting to the top of the hour here. One thing, Eric, you mentioned to me before the show is that you and Roger have a monthly IMEX Green stakeholders call. That all of your stakeholders from various departments come together. Can you talk about how that started and how that has actually really impacted the growth of your sustainability, or the development of your sustainability goals and achievements? Both of you can pipe in there.
This started before my time.
Yeah.
I was handed the torch when I started at MeetGreen, and I don't know, Roger, did it even start before your time? Or
it did. It started before my time. So I was in finance before I joined.
Okay.
Part of the business, and it was when it was even before my time. And I would say it is the kind of the most important part, to get everyone together, even for something as simple as checking that a receptacle for to serve something is able to be recycled or composted at a venue. Sometimes these conversations wouldn't happen if even if they are departments of the same venue, but we bring them together on that call. So it's groundbreaking. It's really, really important. It's the most important part, I would say, of what we do.
It's all related. And food and beverage decisions are waste management implications,
right?
Communications implications, and it just goes on and on. Supply chain.
Well, and it's even like talking to Aurora Dawn Benton about sustainability too, and getting the front of the house staff to talk to the back of the house staff too is really important, because the back of the house staff doesn't necessarily know what goes into the waste bin, right, at the end of the day, because maybe they've already gone home, right, or vice versa. So I love that you're bringing all of those stakeholders in to have those conversations, because we don't necessarily see what ends up happening on the job. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So my final question for both of you is thinking about food and beverage, and what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive, or sustainable, safe, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you, when you're looking at it from the sustainability, all of your standards in creating an event?
Wow. It's a big question, and I'm going to be completely honest. I think the perfect solution might not even exist, because everyone is just so different. I would say it's really, really difficult to design something that is perfect for everyone. So I think the most important part is just recognize that we are all just people, and we can connect with each other, and we can talk to each other. And if we approach it that way and just try to be understanding and help each other, I think that is the most important. So really an invite, if anyone does feel that they are not heard or are not getting what they need, to speak up, and for the planner to make that opportunity available as well, to reach out and say, look, this is what we're planning to do, but we're open to feedback.
Okay. Awesome. Eric? I know this is probably the 4th or 5th time that I've asked you this question. So it'll be interesting how you answer it this time.
Well, I'll try and be really brief, but it's about that integration. I think it's expanding the view of food and beverage to include people and planet in many, many ways. I mean, we're looking at health, the health of people, the health of planets. We're looking at regionality. We're looking at education. So that's what that means to me in events. And similar to Roger, that balance is always changing. I mean, when we're putting an emphasis in one place, another place, maybe we could be doing more. And so we're constantly reflecting and adjusting that ratio of, the different areas that we're looking at.
Right. Well, and I think both of those answers are really, really important because, Roger, I mean, none of us are perfect and we can't do all of it at one time. And the little steps that we can take and trying just to make everybody feel as comfortable as they can be and getting that feedback is important. So, and Eric, just looking at the data and all of that really helps us grow. So, nobody's going to have the 100% perfect, 100% sustainable event all the time, Roger. So, but kudos.
Trying.
Right. Exactly. Just keep trying, adding more on, you're going to get completely, as sustainable as possible with the goal of net zero. So, kudos to you all, for taking the steps and being the leaders in what we're doing, in the industry and what we should be doing. Actually, that reminded me, one final question really quickly is Julius Soleros posted this week on LinkedIn. He said, there's studies out there that saying planners aren't really into this and wellness is not at the forefront, but there's so many people like the two of you that are very passionate about this and organizations that are passionate about this. I mean, do you see it happening or do you still seeing it being pushed back on the back burner by people?
There's definitely more people who can join the party, and we definitely invite and welcome everyone. And I think that there is a shift happening, but sometimes it just seems that when you look at it, it's not happening fast enough. So we just need to remind ourselves to kind of celebrate the successes as well. I would say if there is research and if there is data that people are not as interested or not as much on board, then that is probably the case. But I am pretty certain if you had done the same research 5 years ago, you would have seen completely different figures. I do believe that there is a shift happening towards more consciousness.
Awesome.
As well. And I may get a skewed perspective working at MeetGreen because our clients tend to be very passionate about this, but at the venue side, and we do work with many suppliers and in many different areas. I don't think it's just lip service. I really feel like there's tangible progress that's been made and that there is growth globally on this topic.
Okay. Awesome. Well, yay. Julius.
And room to grow.
And room to grow. There's always room to grow. So thank you again so much for both of you and what you do to help save our planet and keep us all healthy and safe. I appreciate you being here. Go celebrate Global Meetings Industry Day the rest of the day. Woohoo. We love what we do. And actually next week on the Eating at a Meeting podcast, I actually have the eco-friendly beer drinker on the show. And he's going to talk about how he's going to bring insights to the beer brewing industry and how consumers and we as planners can be more environmentally conscious with our beer service. So I'm excited to bring that conversation to the table. So everyone stay safe and eat well. And until next Wednesday, I will see you then. And guys, stay with me for just a second. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.